So weeks ago, I planted this aquarium, and it's been growing in. So we're going to take a look at the first couple of weeks of life of my newest planted tank. It's coming right up. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and today we're going to look at the newest planted tank. It is, it's kind of gotten to its awkward middle school years in terms of planted tanks. I actually planted this tank several weeks ago, and so we have a chance to kind of see what these things might look like over time. I've also made some adjustments, like I didn't quite finish the setup. And you'll see why in just a second, because I held off on the glass pipes. I even had a comment saying, just clean them out and stuff, which is fine. It was much harder to do on the small pipes. For example, the glass pipes on the Bucephalandra that I put on are very small, and you can kind of get them, but I can't get the thing to go all the way around. Anyway, I went through like a really huge diatom phase with that tank. And I'm getting a much milder version of that in here. I mean, you can see it quite a bit, but it's pretty normal. But before I get to that, we actually age out the planted tank. Let me tell you about the thought process I used when I put plants in there. I guess you could call it a thought process. I mostly just kind of went for it with just a couple of ideas. I'm never really sure exactly how the plants are going to grow. I mean, I've used the same plants many times, and they seem to they do differently in different environments, and I'm not always positive what the thing is that made it do super great here and not here. Many times, a lot of everything about the setup's very similar. It's just in a different part of the house. So it could be an ambient light issue even. I mean, there's a lot of ambient light in the room I'm in now. That's proven to be more of a detriment for algae and stuff like that. Although I say after my tanks age out, after a year or so of being in a room like this, they kind of get used to it and they seem to do okay with the algae for the most part. There are a lot of factors to algae, not just the ambient light. So sometimes it's combinations of things. So one plant that I misplanted when I planted the Bucephalandra last year was this big red sword, or at the time it was a small bush. Like sword plants do this too, where they're one plant in one tank and one plant in another tank. So I brought over this sword that was really small and I put it in the flora. I can't remember that. But it got really big and it was kind of weird. It was like planting a background plant right in the front of your tank. So I had to pull it out and I put it in here. So I made a place for it, just kind of in the back, just to see what it would do. So I figured if it grows really tall like that, it'd be good to cover the intake for the canister filter, you know, and that whole mechanism. Even though it's glass, if I had a plant obscuring it, you wouldn't see it at all. So even while doing the hardscape, I made sure to make a lot of space around what that area would be so I could plant small plants and other things to sort of obscure that mechanism. Also, as much as I can, I like to try to hide the lines, at least one of the lines on the back of the aquarium. I haven't done a very good job with this one yet, but I'm hoping that the plants in the back here will grow and kind of encompass that too, and just kind of hug the edges of this thing. Anyway, so I went with 4-leaf clover as a part of the carpet in here. I've also got a Dwarf Sagittaria in here. The Dwarf Sag can get pretty big or can stay pretty small. I've seen it do both. And so I'm going to put it in here and just kind of see. It's one, like, I find that these kind of grassy ones like that are real easy to pull out and move around and put them in more appropriate spots. Because sometimes they'll just kind of, even if they do really well when you first plant them, they'll just kind of explode out in a bunch of different directions. And more on that in a second. So I had these other swords, and they're ones I wish I could really use some help identifying them. I unboxed them on air, and I can't find the episode. I got them from H2O Plants in a plant pack, and there are these tiny swords. And they do so well. They're one that's kind of started to take over a couple of different tanks. Like I initially planted them in the tank with the face. My other older fluval flora with the face in the back of it, I planted it in there, and it absolutely took over. And actually, to pull plants for this, some of the plants I pulled were, I just pulled out a gap right in front of where the face is in that aquarium so you can actually see her again. I need to go back in and kind of like change a few things and trim that aquarium up too. I think that'll be a fun project. But I planted those swords along the sides, and some, no, I don't think I did over there. So I have them just over here in this corner. They run like crazy, so they're trying to take over a bunch of tanks, but you have to sort of establish a mother plant. So I took some really healthy specimens right out of that gap for where that face is, and I planted them all the way in the back corner over here. The theory is that they'll start to kind of grow out. All these other tall plants that are in the front here, this is all dwarf sag, and it's very similar to the sword plant, but a much finer leaf. So it'd be kind of an alternating leaf structure. If you have it a little bit wider, then a little bit narrower. Hopefully this doesn't go really tall. Like sometimes it turns into this tall grass, and if it does that, I'll have to just pull it out. But a lot of times it'll stay in these small little bushes and just kind of branch out throughout there, and you get kind of a medium carpet. Now the four-leaf clover, I've already what's cool is you can see the growth in here because the growth's bright green, and this four-leaf clover has been going all over the place. Like I see little new leaves all over the place. Now this has been really slow growing for me, but it loves, well, you might say what plant doesn't love it, but they are able to really take advantage of really rich nutrient soil. So this fresh aqua soil and stuff, they eat it up. The ones upstairs are doing the same thing in the tank that I planted last year, the Hydra 25-gallon. So a lot of the clover that I have on the bottom here came from that Atlantic Aquarium's care package. I didn't take all of it from up there, but I took a portion of it. It's already starting to grow in that tank. And it's done remarkably well, and in fact, I decided I didn't have quite enough, so I went back to the website and I bought 2 more packages, and I installed them in here too. Those little Tropica cups really hold a lot of this particular plant, and the other plants too. A plant that I've misplanted in this tank is this right here, that I haven't looked up yet. So this is another plant that I got from Atlantic Aquariums, and when I put it in, there were small little specimens, maybe just barely peeping up from behind the rock over there. And they've grown more than anything else. Like I can tell that they're going to be real viney, growy plants. I purposely avoided most stem plants. I've never had these before. I had no idea what they were going to do or what they'd look like or what they even like. I can grow a lot of different plants now, especially with the CO2 and stuff. I just kind of put it in my most optimal conditions and kind of see what it does. Then I move parts of it around to other tanks and see how they do in there. This grows way too fast for me. What I will probably do is I'm going to trim it back, probably pull these out, cut them in half to the top halves, and then I'm going to put them in the back, probably around that sword plant over there. And they can grow and be big more in the background. Now, as far as all the roots coming out and stuff, I know it always looks a little funny on the hardscape, just this kind of like weird little clump of wood. But this is what my goal with that was, is I've put Anubias all the way through it. Like I have a ton of Anubias. I've got it in just about every aquarium. I really love growing it. It's a fun plant. It does all kinds of neat things. So what I did is I took some that I had in the old tank. I had a lot of it in the old tank that was here, and some from other tanks around. And I've just taken good specimens and kind of weaved them inside the wood. And I did that so that so the branches will be coming out, and you keep the motion and stuff that creates the branches. But they've got kind of a nice green background, especially with it being black in the background. I want the leaves to kind of become the background for these branches and stuff that are kind of jetting out the side. This will slowly creep and take over and become an entire network here if you've let it. I also planted a lot of Buse in here because I like to try Buse in just about any tank that I've got. I've got a couple of small little samples like in some different areas here and there. I'm not sure how this was grown. I got it on eBay, so I'm not sure if the ad said that it was grown underwater, but I'm not certain that it was or not. It doesn't seem to be like melting away in a tremendous way. In fact, it doesn't seem to be doing much of anything, but that's kind of the way it is with Buse. You got to ignore it for a few weeks and suddenly, oh, I see more leaves, or it seems better all of a sudden.
Now, after I finished planting the tank, I decided to go ahead and fill it up. And the way I did this is I ran a line over from the 210 into this tank. That way it gets all that kind of water that's already got some fish stuff in it, and maybe the active biological stuff in there will start happening. It's just all meant to be a real easy transition for the plants and everything else, with no chlorine, no dechlorinating to worry about. And while that filled up, I decided to take the Sun filter. This is the filter that I ended up with on the 27-gallon cube at the end. I took it off the 20 when I replaced the 20, and I put it downstairs because that pump eventually failed. And what you see now is I'm pulling out some used media. That BioHome Ultimate supposedly goes forever and ever. I never trust just that, but I've added a few other things in there too. What I don't bother to really show you is that I've got that third sponge, those blue sponges you see in the background. The third one is in the very bottom. So I started this canister off with a sponge in the very bottom. I've added the used BioHome, and right there, this is what's left over. That's all fresh BioHome Ultimate. And the last tray, it's got one more tray, and the last tray is going to have some biological stuff right out of the sump. So this has just come out of my sump on the 210. And it's going to go in there also. That way I'll for sure has some good active bacteria going in there. And just a jump start on the cycle, hopefully. Notice when I put the lid on, then of course I'm going to go ahead and pre-fill that sump with water from the 210. Now notice as I put this on, it's got the integrated heater and how nicely it all kind of just slides in there. I'm super happy with this thing. It works really well. So here I am filling it up. Let's take a look at the aquarium over the course of several days and see how it evolves. So these floating plants that you see in the top are frog bit. And I put them in there partially because I want them to help absorb the nutrients and stuff, but also I was secretly hoping that my blue-eyed rainbows maybe had laid some eggs on there and I could transfer them over, maybe get some babies. No such luck with that yet. I have added a small inler in there to kind of, try out the waters and see how it goes. I also put in a cherry red shrimp. It's been a few days, and they both don't seem to be bothered by anything. Of course, I've done water tests, and I'm not detecting ammonia at this point. I think it's time to go ahead and add some fish gradually.
So when I did the setup video for the filter for this tank, I left the original plastic parts on, and I held back on my glass, and that's because a lot of planted tanks, they end up in this diatom stage, and I saw it coming. Keeping tanks in this particular part of the house has always been challenging because I've got these two big windows. It can sit sort of in the shadow of these windows, but also it still gets a lot of fall off light. There's a lot of extra light around to cause problems. So just about every tank that I've had has ended up in this kind of brown algae phase, this diatom phase. And I'm right in the thick of it right now. So the very last chore that I've done on this tank is I went ahead and I installed the glass tubes. I bought tubes that are the perfect diameter for the tubes that are coming out of this canister, the hoses, that is. See, the thing is, once it enters the stage, just about everything is covered in this kind of brown diatom algae. And my glass pipes on my other tank are still kind of brown from that, which makes them seem a little pointless. I've gotten to where I don't notice it anymore, but I want them to be clean, at least in the short term. I do have the brushes to clean them out. I think it'll be easier in these bigger ones than it is in the small ones, but much easier. I might actually be able to get all the way around the corner and stuff in these. But that is the core reason why I decided to wait till now to put it on. Now that the algae's kind of had its way with the tank, I think it's kind of starting to move in the other direction. I'll be doing water changes now more often to kind of make sure it keeps moving in that direction. I don't mind that brown algae covers everything. I don't think it looks good, but it's a great food for a lot of different fish and stuff. So when I introduce fish in here, especially the grazers and stuff, they're going to go nuts with lots and lots to eat. The other thing I'm going to do in here is set up CO2. In fact, I've already done it. It's running now. But I'm going to do that as a separate video, and then we can look at it over time. I just set it up a couple of days ago, and I'm anxious to see. I haven't seen a tremendous amount of result after 2 days, 2 or 3 days, of course, but it'll be interesting to see over the course of a few weeks what it does. Putting the glass parts on was actually pretty easy. I cut the hose to the appropriate length after a little trial and error. And what I like to do is I took some hot water and I kind of dipped the end of the hose in that hot water and let it get a little mushy. Not too mushy, but a little bit more pliable. And then I just kind of stuck it on the end of that hose and put it on there, and works great. As the hose contracts back to its natural shape, it forms a good seal there, and it seemed to work great so far on the other tanks. This is only my second time using the glass thing, so I'm being a little bit more paranoid about it than probably I should be. And of course I hooked up the other side, which was the kind of the industrious one. I had for the longest time when I was running this, I had a little white surface skimmer going over here because I didn't immediately set up a surface skimmer with this. One doesn't come with the basic plastic parts. So I put up this little white one that I'd used for a long time, and it did okay. It's the one that I had set up in the cube that was here before. But this glass one that I unpacked, I guess it was on the Plenum Mods video, I changed the amount that was covering the middle part of the tube so I could direct how much was coming up out of the plenum, so the plenum's getting some suction too. And you could actually, when I moved it a certain way, you could see bits of debris kind of coming up out of the plenum. You could tell there was some suction there, and I just kind of, and I let it run for a few minutes, and then I kind of opened it back up a little bit. So you do have true suction coming from the bottom, the middle, and the top. The surface skimmer I had to fiddle with a little bit, but once I got it to the optimal optimal depth, it works great. And it has been, it works over several days too. There's a lot of evaporation in this tank. I don't have a lid for it. That's another project that I need to do, is to put a lid on here. What I've done in the past is I've gotten a bunch of glass. I got a piece of glass cut. I just say it's a glass shelf, and I get the corners rounded off and stuff, and I get an expert to make me a piece of glass to put over there. What I might do with this one is actually get 2 pieces of glass. One that I can move and do most of the maintenance that I need to do on there, and another one to be sort of a gap filler that I never take off, that I just kind of leave up there. There's always a little bit of a gap when you do that in the back where the light attaches to the back of the rimless tank or anything else I've got on there, like my little drop checker and stuff like that. Of course, any cables that are coming out of there or anything, although there's really not much other than we got the CO2 tube and the and this thing on the back, and that's all going into it. And then there's the inline UV sterilizer, I almost forgot. So that hasn't done anything to prevent diatoms, but the water has been pretty clear. Unless you, like, a few minutes before I started shooting this, I actually stupidly was like, oh, I need to clean the glass real quick. So I stirred up a few things already. In the wide view, you don't see it quite as much, but the water has been just crystal clear. And I've got it running at, I think I did a real conservative, like 4 hours a day or something like that. I'm hoping that'll counteract the effect of, like I was saying, the big windows and stuff. So I just want to say a huge thank you to my patrons. Help me buy the extra plants to fill this tank in, and we'll be buying my lid that have come out there. I'm just about to place that order, and I'm going to do it with the funds that you guys gave to me generously. Thank you very much. Huge thank you to Seven Ports that provided me with a tank, the glass parts, the glass hardware that I used on there, and some of the substrate and so much more. You guys are amazing. Big thanks to Awase for the canister filter that I used to put this together, and a huge thank you to Fluval for the UV filter that's behind this. This is me piecing together some contributions from a lot of different really amazing aquarium vendors, and I hope you, if you decide to check them out, you tell them who sent you. So, like I said before, the next video would be the CO2. I have finished my 5 interviews for the water change companion, and that will be, you're going to get an introduction video the Sunday that those start, and then that week you'll be getting the little smaller videos, and then the next Sunday will be the full version. So they'll be kind of like small commercials, but they also kind of interesting little topics, like singular parts of the interview that I thought were more interesting. But I've got a whole video I've already shot that explains all that, and you'll be seeing that real soon. So I'll see you next week with the CO2 video, and then we'll start March off with the water change companion. Until we meet again, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. So a lot of the four-leaf, those little, the little tropic, it's great. Putting on the hose for, putting the hose, so,